Oh, in my last video, I spoke a lot about star seeds and a lot about the universe. Well, this video is going to be about star seeds. So, a lot of people out there say that star seeds are beings from another universe or another life that didn't live on Earth, and they reincarnate here on Earth for a specific reason. Well, that is true, but there's multiple versions of star seeds. Now, every single human being on this planet is a starseed. If you want to go by the fact that they have a life that wasn't lived on Earth. Almost every single human has lived a life not on Earth. You just have to remember that. What a starseed like me and a lot of people are around the world is different. It's, yes, we did have lives on a different planet, but in this life, we learned about spiritual excellence. We became spiritually excellent. And we agreed in this life to manifest on Earth specifically for a mission. To help Earth or to destroy Earth, whichever reason our species gave us, you know? Because there is no good or bad in the universe. There's just good and bad in the perspective of who's doing the action, in the perspective of who's perceiving the action. How you get a starseed, a lot of ways, what they do is they take the energy of the being, the soul that they want to make into a starseed. They take that soul out of the being because they agreed to do this, and then they put it inside a body. But this body normally can't sustain the soul because there's way too much energy. So what they do is they manipulate the DNA just a little bit so it accepts the soul. And then once the human body accepts the soul, it's birthed, and voila, starseed. That's one way. Another way is that they just take a soul and put it in. Other ways are through hybridization, and they're basically all the same thing, just different species have different techniques. It's manipulating DNA. It can either be physical DNA or spiritual DNA, because there is spiritual DNA. Your DNA is a transceiver. It receives and gives off scalar waves. So this means that it vibrates within multiple dimensions, and as do our bodies, which is why we have an astral body and a physical body, because we vibrate between multiple dimensions. So our DNA, on the higher vibration of our body, is spiritual. It's more metaphysical than physical. So all they have to do is influence it with thought. This is how a lot of hybrids are produced on this planet. But not the Greys. The Greys hybridize physically because the Greys do exist within our physical dimension. The Greys exist within all dimensions, as all beings do. If it's alive, it exists within almost all dimensions. Now, it does exist to a point, meaning it vibrates to a specific point up and it vibrates to a specific point down. But in between those 2 points, it vibrates in every single dimension. Now, the higher up in the dimensions you go, the more dimensions you exist within. The Greys are another story. Maybe I should get into a little history of the Greys. Okay. So, the Greys have a long history with humans, and they've been around for a lot longer than we gave them credit for. This isn't a new thing. I mean, yes, they're new to us, because we don't remember it. But way back, thousands, millions of years ago, well over 26,000 years ago, there was a race on Earth. Now, they lived on the island of Mu. Mu is where present-day Hawaii, all the way to the Easter Islands. It was a really big continent. It's under the ocean now. Now, this island, to the Greeks, was known as Atlantis. It did exist, but it wasn't called Atlantis. It was called Mu. M-U with a little dash over it. The beings that lived on Mu were human. They were about roughly 15 to 17 feet in height. Their skulls were protruded in the back, so they came back kind of to a point. They almost never had hair. If they did, it was a rare occurrence. And it was white most of the time. Like, pure white, not faded white. Like, it'll burn your eyeballs looking at it white. They were a mainly female-dominant race. They were extremely telepathic. They existed between the third and seventh dimensions, physically. After that, they existed metaphysically, but they still existed on Earth. Now, at this time, the Muians, who are also called Lemurians, these Lemurians were peaceful. They had crystalline technology. They never waged war. They absolutely hated atomic energy. They never used it. They denied all of it. At some point, I don't even think they knew about it for a while, until the Martians came in. But so they were a thriving race. Now, they weren't the only beings on Earth at this point in time. There were humans all over the place, but they didn't look like the Lemurians. The Lemurians were special. The Lemurians were the ultimate version of humans at this point in time. They were the most evolved at the point in time that we're living at. There were over 22 different species of human. Now, I don't mean different color. I mean literally different species. Some were striped, some had tails, some were tall, some were short. There were a lot of weird-looking beings on Earth at this point in time. Now, this is all after the Earth was created. Now, Earth was created as an experiment. What happened is there were a bunch of beings got together, and one of these beings, her name was Gaia. Gaia gave her life to create Earth. She said, well, maybe I should be the one to create this Earth, because she was an extremely powerful being. And the other beings agreed, and she manifested into the physical form of a planet. Now, this took billions of years to process, because you have to go through the creation of the planet, the gravity, combining the asteroids and everything. What scientists know how Earth was created is true, but the reason it was created, they don't know yet. So, this is after Earth was created, obviously. After the humans were manipulated, because the original human race was actually they were a sapient race. They were a monkey-like species on Earth, and another race came in, manipulated their DNA, destroyed almost all of the life on Earth for a good portion of Earth's history. I mean, they took all the DNA of all the animals, put it into the human DNA. Humans contain every single DNA strand of every single being on Earth, even the microorganisms. Every single being. We're a living ark, a databank. Other scientists don't know this. They say that 92% of our DNA is junk. Well, they're wrong. If it was junk, it wouldn't be there. Our bodies would just get rid of it. But anyways, back to the Lemurians. So the Lemurians were living in peace at this point in time, and the other beings around this world were being attracted to Lemuria because of the energy that was coming from it. Now, Lemuria was set up in circles. There were the higher rings and there were the lower rings. The lower you got in, the higher the spiritual power. So the outer rings of Lemuria were the peasants, basically. They were the ones that did the work. Now, they were appreciative of this. They didn't rebel. They knew that they had to do their part. Everything was in place. This was a completely utopian society. The further and further you got in, the more higher up the beings were considered, because the more spiritual they were. Now, in the dead center, these were the Nakals. The Nakals were the most spiritual out of all humans on Earth at this point in time. They could focus their energy down to the last atom. They could split atoms, they could put them together. This is why the Lemurians were so successful, because they could create anything they wanted. They could just combine atoms. So, this is where the Mayan civilization came from. But this is a different story. I'll get into it later. So, the structure of the city of Mu was the tree of life because it is an extremely spiritual geometry. And with each circle from the tree of life, beings from around Earth were attracted to the specific circle that they, um, related to most. Because each circle represented a specific spiritual ability, telekinesis, telepathy, earth manipulation, water manipulation, what have you. Each circle represented something, and each being went to a specific circle because they felt as though that's where they belonged. They lived there in peace. Now there were humans on America at this time, but America was different shaped. It was more Pangea than it was anything. It was closer to our scientist knows Pangea. So as all this was happening, the Nacals, the way they did this is they created vortices from the circles. Coming up from the circles, they vortexed energy that attracted the beings. So the beings came in to fill the vortex. Once all the beings filled the vortex, that vortex stopped. Another one formed in another circle, and it just kept going until all the circles were filled. And then the Nacals were happy with this, so then Lemuria existed for another couple hundred years or so. At this point in time, in the 8th dimension, I think, I'm not positive. Now, I'm using numbers for relatable terms. There really is almost no way to calculate a dimension, unless you use frequencies. But from our perspective, we are in the 3rd, they would be in the 8th. The Martians. Now, Martians did exist. They still do exist. Oh my god, many of them. They own galaxies all to themselves. But at this point in time, the Martians still lived on Mars. And they were really, really high in technology, but they were really, really low in spirituality. They still believed in gods. And this isn't because they were primitive, in a sense. No, it's because there was a higher dimensional race of beings that were manipulating the Martians for their own gain. Not the Martians' gain, but their gain. And this is what the Martians perceived as gods. Throughout Earth, this has happened billions of times. The Hindus, the Greeks. Oh god, the Greeks contacted the Metachlorians. But so they were contacting their gods and whatnot, and they had technology, they had hovercrafts, they had what have you, And the Martians are an extremely male-dominated race. Male energy. I mean, they loved war. I mean, they were infatuated with war. They just killed themselves left and right. There were civil wars all the time, but they didn't care. Because they weren't going to eliminate themselves. They knew this. They just did it for fun. I mean, yeah, there were civil disputes over color because, some Martians can be blue, some Martians can be red, some Martians can be white. They were just, some said, hey, we're better because we're a different color than you. This happens on Earth all the time. But at this point in time, there was another race from another galaxy. They were called the Arctuvians. This is what we know as the Greys. At this point in time, they labeled themselves as Arctuvians. Arktvin. Don't get that mixed up with ARC. ARC is information. ARK is different. Because there are Arcturians, and that's ARC. But the Arctuvians were a very spiritually excellent race, but they were very limited in their knowledge. One of the first things they developed was planet-to-planet space travel. So what they did is they left. They said, fuck our planet, let's go somewhere else. So they developed means for transportation, and they left their planet, and the first species they come in contact with were, what do you know, the Martians. Now, the Martians have never met beings of light, because that's what the Arctuvians were. The Arctuvians were beings of light. They were connected to Source through a spirit. They had access to divine knowledge. They knew exactly how everything worked. But the Arctuvians were very ignorant in their ways. They only accepted what they knew. They didn't accept what everybody else knew. Now, because of perspective, there was a bias. Just like there's a bias in everything. This bias is what caused the Great War. the Arctuvians met with the Martians. Now, the Martians, are, as I said, are a very warlike species, and the Arctuvians were a very peaceful species at this time. So they didn't want to get in trouble with the Martians, because they knew the Martians could destroy them. So each race offered up their virgin, king or princess or prince. Sorry. The Martians offered up their prince. The Arctuvians offered up Martians offered up their princess. The Arctuvians offered up their prince. Now, when they mated, an offspring was not produced because the chromosomes didn't match. But at this time, neither race knew what chromosomes were. Not even the Martians did. Now, they are advanced in technology, but not really in genetics. So, the Arctuvians accused the Martian gods of being false, and the Martians took this as an insult. So, the Martians fired upon the Arctuvians. The Arctuvians, who didn't really have weapons at this time, had no clue what to do. Now, while this was going on, the Arctuvians had also met the species known as the Pleiadians. The Pleiadians are also a light race. So the Arctuvians were all happy. They were like, oh, hey, we met another species like us. So they did the same thing, offered up their prince, offered up their princess. And when they mated, an offspring was produced. This is what we know as the Yael. The Yael are a different story for now. Now, when the Arctuvians and the Pleiadians met in peace, the Arctuvian prince, this time his name was Arkmec, Arkmec. He was on Ira, which was the planet of the Pleiadians at this point in time. He committed adultery, and that was punishable by death in both the Pleiadian and the Arctuvian world. But the Arctuvians didn't want to kill their prince because he was supposed to be the next king. And the Pleiadians didn't want to kill him because that would result in a war. And neither race wanted a war, so they made a small exception. For Arkmec, anyways, which was lucky for him. And the Arctuvians somehow convinced the Pleiadians to give them a battleship, because the Pleiadians did have weapons technology for defense. They weren't really a warring race. So the Pleiadians gave the Arctuvians this technology, and then the Arctuvians used this battleship on the Martians. This was bad. Since the Martians knew about the Pleiadians, they saw the Pleiadian battleship and instantly went to war with the Pleiadians. So now the Pleiadians and the Martians are at war because of the Arctuvians. The Arctuvians and the Martians are at war because of the Pleiadians. And this is just a giant jumble of a mistake. Now, at this time, the Council of Nine was slowly being formed. Now, the Council of Nine is a high council of 9 members from each race in our galaxy. ET race, not multidimensional race. That was supposed to bring out peace. It was kind of like a galactic UN, if you want to think about it that way. And it was the most superior beings of these races. Now, my past life, I was part of this Council of Nine. I wasn't part of the original Council of Nine, but I was part of it at one point in time, which is how I know about all this, because I lived through it. But the Arctuvian king, Arkshim, at this time, because Arkmec wasn't king yet. No, not Arkshim. What was his name? Arkshim's the Grey King now. I'll have to ask my friend Tucker. He knows more about the Arctuvians than I do. Oh, they're king names anyways. I don't really care for their names that much. But the Arctuvian king at this time sent a message to the Martians and said, if you don't surrender, we're going to blow you up. The Martians said, and the Arctuvians blew them up. The Arctuvians dropped a capsule in their atmosphere that interacted with the oxygen and the carbon, and when it ignited, the whole entire planet was engulfed in flames. It looked like a miniature sun for a small period of time, which is why Mars is covered in red, because it fused the dirt together. Everything was burning alive almost instantaneously. No life was left. The atmosphere was dissipated. Now, some Martians, this is where Lemuria comes into play. The Artuvians didn't interact with Earth at this time because they didn't care enough. Earth was too small for them. So they said, screw Earth. The Martians, on the other hand, viewed Earth as a viable place to live. So some Martians that knew that that Mars was going to be destroyed, fled to Earth. And this is how the Martians and the Lemurians met. So while Mars is being destroyed in the 8th dimension, back down in between the 3rd and 7th dimension, the Martians manifest on Earth. Now, at first, the Martians lived in peace with the Lemurians. But they had disputes. The Martians wanted to use nuclear energy while the Lemurians didn't. The Lemurians were extremely telepathic and psychic, while the Martians weren't at this point in time. Now, they are now, but they weren't then. And plus, the Martians wanted to claim Earth as their own. And Lemurians said, Earth belongs to no one. You can live here in peace. But the Martians said, no, ours. This is what caused another war. Now, the Lemurians didn't want to go to war, which is why the Lemurians were practically destroyed, because they had no weapons. They had no means of defending themselves except for their own minds. And that's what they used. They killed them with their minds. Now, there was an asteroid that was heading, well, I have to say a small planet, because it was huge. The crater in the Gulf of Mexico, that's where this came from. This meteorite, asteroid, whatever you want to call it, was hurtling towards Earth, and the Lemurians knew about it. The Lemurians said, oh, it's in divine order, it needs to happen, it needs to hit, let it hit, and the Martians said, no, we must blow it up. Now, eventually, because the Lemurians were psychic and the Martians weren't, the Martians listened to the Lemurians. When the asteroid hit Earth, it broke apart, and it caused tsunamis, and the tsunamis and the pieces hit a major Martian city and destroyed a lot of Martians. Martians weren't too happy about this. So the Martians enslaved the Lemurians, and Earth became mainly a Mars-dominated race at this point. Now, the Yael. The Yael came to Earth as well because they didn't have a planet. Now, they were set off on their own planet, but they wanted to explore, and for whatever reason, they came to Earth. Now, the Jewish history, Jews, Hebrews themselves, come from the Yael. This is where their lineage comes from. The Yael, their specialty was geometry and math. Lemurian specialty was science. So they lived in peace. When the Martians came in, Martians' specialty was destruction. So it just broke everything apart. Now, there was intermating going on because the Lemurian chromosomes could match the Martian chromosomes, and the Yael chromosomes could match the Martian and the Lemurian chromosomes. So when this intermingling happened, we, humans now, are their offspring. We are the result of that. Which is why we're so weird looking. At this time, the Martians dropped a nuke. Not the Martians. A reptilian race. A reptilian race wanted Earth for their own purposes. They wanted to enslave Earth. And they saw that the Lemurians, the Martians, and the Yael, everything was just blech. So they decided to blow it up. They said, fuck it. So the Martians, this reptilian race, dropped a nuke on Earth, and this fused dirt layer. It killed off almost everything. But some Lemurians got away, some Nicals got away, some Martians got away, some Yael got away, and a lot of humans actually went underground. And then when everything was done and over with, they resurfaced, and blah, 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 we're here now. But this reptilian race at this time still owns Earth to this day. That's something a lot of people don't know. Now, the Council of Nine decided to solve this giant fuck-up. What they did is they punished the Greys, the Arctuvians. They said, you must take your population that's not on your planet from another galaxy. By the way, that galaxy still exists, the Arctuvians still exist, but they're stuck on their planet right now. They're not allowed to leave. They're quarantined. The Arctuvians that left their planet, which were a large number of them, were forced to genetically modify themselves. They no longer have emotions. They're robotic in nature, and they're organic and robotic. They're both, but they're organically robotic, if that makes sense. They have no genitalia. They can't reproduce. They get more of themselves by cloning. They just take the soul of a dead Grey and put it into a new body, and voila. So they took away their emotions, they took away their genitalia, they genetically mutated themselves, and they set themselves in Zeta Reticuli. Right now, they live on Zeta 1 and Zeta 2. There are only 13,000 Greys known to exist in the third and fourth dimension. In the higher dimensions, there's more, but they're slowly dying. The Grey race is going extinct. Greys don't really like Earth that much. And, well, because since they have no emotions, they don't really care for our well-being. They're just using us as lab rats. Study us, find our weakness, destroy us. Use our planet for resources, and then destroy the planet. Move on. They do this all the time. They do it with plenty of races. They're doing it to the Pleiadians. The Pleiadians are not to be trusted. A lot of information that the Pleiadians say is because of the Greys. Now, the Pleiadians themselves are a peaceful race. They're a beautiful, amazing race. But the Arctuvians, the Greys, manipulated the Pleiadians and basically said, yep, you're under our control now. And they genetically manipulated them. So now the Greys have mental control of the Pleiadians. They're puppets now. So now there are good Pleiadians just as there are bad Pleiadians. There are good humans just as there are bad humans. It's how it works. But I just wanted to shed a little light on some history of, anything. If I did leave some stuff out, and I'm going to talk about a lot more in more videos, but yeah. Voila. I'll post another video soon, and adios.